Abraham Lincoln warned that the philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next. Would you like to know what's being taught in today's classrooms? Welcome to Say What? With attorney Mark Schneider and Pastor George Rosca Jr. They'll explore the issues facing children, parents, and society as a result of the public schools and the forces behind them. Say What is the radio program of Protect Our Kids, which seeks to inform and equip concerned citizens about the looming crisis in American education. So listen in as your hosts, Mark Schneider and George Rosca Jr. unpack the issues and organizations affecting our children. And now here's your hosts, Mark Schneider and George Rosca Jr.
Hello, everyone. I'm George Rosca.
And I'm Mark Schneider.
And we want to welcome you to today's episode 158 of Say What, where we talk about the threats to our children in the public school system, including the tight grip that the teachers' unions have on our schools and how to overcome it through universal school choice.
That's right, George. We've spoken about this topic before, but we have some updates that are critical to hear for parents across the United States, especially from California. Often real change, both bad and beneficial, happen on the coasts, and particularly from California. And we've got potentially a very good thing that's happening there.
Yeah, we're just going to have to be patient a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it's not imminent,
Nope.
but we want to give parents a heads up. So what is universal school choice?
It's the idea that money follows the child to whichever source or location of education the parents deem most appropriate. Parents get to decide where and how their children are educated. 9 states have passed universal school choice legislation so far, with Arizona leading the charge in July of 2022. These measures were made possible because the GOP trifecta in those states, holding the governor's mansion, the state house, and the state senate, a trend across all of the red states that passed school choice legislation. North Carolina, however, was the first to do so, I guess, without a GOP trifecta, which is good news. And there are 22 states in the country right now that have a GOP trifecta where the Republicans control both chambers of the legislature and the governor's office. And we're going to see more momentum in this year in those states that haven't gone universal on school choice.
So, Mark, you mentioned that there's 9 already universal. There's an additional 3 that have close to that because they might just not have gone into effect now. So 3 of those states have a phasing in of the program so that by 2025 or 2026, it will eventually end up, being fully funded universal school choice. So all in all, there's 12 states now that in the next couple of years will have all of that into effect. So Arizona, Utah, Oklahoma, Iowa, Arkansas, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, North Carolina, Alabama, and Florida. But we have actually active bills and plans by the governor or the state legislature to pass universal school choice in some pretty big states now. Texas, which has just gone through its primaries, and I think close to 75%. Last year, Governor Abbott tried to pass universal school choice, and there was a lot of rhinos who were holding out against him. Well, out of all of those rhinos, I think almost 75% of them got kicked out in the primaries. They were voted out by parents. And this was the number one reason that because they voted against school choice. So Texas, I think, is well on its way to getting it. Tennessee with Governor Lee there, North Dakota, Mississippi, and Louisiana. So by the end of 2024, middle of 2024, we might have a total of 17 states now with true universal school choice. And now we're talking, I think well over 15 million public school kids, or just kids in America, when you add them up in the population of those kids in those states, that now have access to universal school choice, which is absolutely huge. I mean, this was unthinkable 5 years ago. I still remember when I got introduced to the idea of school choice, and I had no clue something like that could possibly exist.
Almost too good to be true.
Too good to be true. Like, how do you set something like that up? So, obviously the question that I always had back then was, well, how would California ever pass it? because we know that we don't have anywhere close to a trifecta. In fact, here we have the trifecta of the Marxist Democrats, and so there's just no way. They have a supermajority in both the House and the Senate. They've had the governor's office now for well over 20 years. So what can we do here? Well, parents, the only approach we have is the approach that we discussed in episode 156. It's the initiative process, that citizens have a right to bring forth an initiative and get it on the ballot. And so that's what we would like to talk about. Now, it has been tried in the past, and we never got the signatures to make it successful.
We didn't get the signatures because we just didn't have enough time, frankly. Yeah. And but this new effort is much better organized. There's a lot of really solid people behind it. And we've got time, because what we're going to talk about, George, is not being positioned for this election cycle in 2024. So we're way out ahead of the game, because we're talking about 2026. So if this is successful, we would see it on the ballot during the midterm elections 2 years from now. So as we mentioned in episode 156, the initiative statute enables the people of California and 26 other states that also have it to take the power of government in their own hands. If they fashion sensible legislation and they gather enough signatures, it will be on the ballot for the voters of that state to vote on. And so what we wanted to talk about today is what's called the Children's Educational Opportunity Act, which is a form of universal school choice. And we think that there is a lot of very good sense behind this initiative. So we wanted to bring that to your attention.
So we'll walk you through what is included in this act. So in a nutshell, there are probably 6 major highlights here.
Right.
So the first one is that this act would provide parents, every single child, but the parent is going to be the administrator of this funding, $17,000 per year, tax-free, without raising taxes. And this is going to come out of the Prop 98 funds in the state of California. So parents, you can take now this $17,000 that you're going to get into an ESA account. So this, number 2, allows the parent the option to set up an educational savings account. And the purpose of this account is point number 3. It's for TK through 12th grade. And that during this time from TK through 12th grade, you will get $17,000 infused into that ESA account on a yearly basis.
Correct. And any funds, this is point number 4, any funds unspent earn interest and can be used for future education expenses. It's not like a voucher where if you don't use it, you lose it. No, if you don't use these educational savings accounts funds, they continue to accrue an account for future educational benefits. At the end of 12th grade, any unused funds can be used for trade technical schools, community college, the university, and postgraduate for the remainder of a child's life, which is pretty cool. After 18 years of age, the student can transfer any unused ESA funds to family members, which is really fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the way that this is being structured is very interesting. You know, there was the previous one, CaliforniansForSchoolChoice.org, that organization. Right. And I believe theirs was for $15,000 per child per school year from, kindergarten through 12th grade. This goes from TK through 12th grade. This option of transferring is actually very unique. I think it's a very clever idea, because within every family, every child's going to be very different. Some are just not going to want to go to college. They might go for 2 years at a trade school and that's it, right? So then they'll have a bunch of unspent, money there, whereas maybe their younger brother or sister is going to go to some Ivy League school and they'll need a little bit more money than what they've ever had, in this account. So that's really interesting. So how would this CEO Act work? So let's walk through. Okay, so step one, you get the $17,000 per year.
Yeah, one question comes, an obvious question, where's the money come from? Well, it comes from Proposition 98 funds, which was, I think, passed way back in 1988. It's been around for a long time, which mandates that a certain percentage of the general California funds go for public education. So this money has already been set aside. And there's two ways that school districts get funded: Proposition 98 funds and local property taxes. Those are the two ways. So no new taxes, George, no new fees. This is money that's already been allocated for public education. So that's where the money would come from. Then a parent gets to select the school of their choice. They would enroll the child in a kindergarten, as an example, where the tuition is, let's say, $7,000 per year. Up through 8th grade, let's say, just as an example, $7,000 per year. The unused balance, interest and future expenses, at the end of the 8th grade, the student has $90,000 in their educational savings accounts that can be used for high school or even post-secondary education. Yeah.
And in high school, for example, usually private schooling in California here is costing somewhere around $20,000 per year. Plus, you're still getting 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, that's $17,000. So you're actually, in the minus $3,000 every year, right? But you have your bank to pull from what you've stored there over the K through 8 period. So now you graduating high school, you have $78,000 in that account that you could now use to go to either a trade school, a community college, a university, do any postgraduate, or just, who knows, maybe in your 30s you might be going back for a master's, getting an MBA or something. That money follows you for the rest of your life. But if that's not what you want to do, we mentioned the idea that you can actually even transfer it to another family member or to a school. It still gives you an option that, maybe you've had such a great time at whatever. It could have been the public school, and you're going to just write a check and donate all that money right back to your school of choice. Yeah, just so to get a little more detailed about this, if you get $17,000 a year, and let's say you didn't use all that in K through 8th grade, and now you're in high school all of a sudden where the tuition is more for a private school. In fact, the average tuition is about $20,000 a year for a high school education. Well, you're still getting that $17,000 a year, plus the money that was left over from the money you didn't use during elementary school, as you mentioned, George, which in that example would add up to $78,000 that can be used. So very, very sensible. But there are some other features of the bill as well. One goes to eligible education expenses, and we should talk about this. So TK through 12th grade expenses includes things like curriculum, books, online courses, religious and academic course materials, school supplies, equipment, academic tutoring, testing fees, special needs services, transportation to and from school activities, and faith-based education curriculums. Yeah, so this is not going to be one of those, very, biased, bigoted, hateful initiatives. This is going to be inclusive. We're not going to discriminate against religion. So parents, you'd be able to, cut the check to a Christian private school if you wanted to with this ESA. And then also associated with vocational training for any kind of post-secondary expenses would be, for undergraduate, graduate school tuition, books, school supplies, equipment, tutoring, special needs services, right? You have parents who might have, autistic children. They need different kind of support as they're going through their academic career, right? Or other kind of disabilities. So these parents need to tailor the education of their children in a very different way. This money is flexible in providing those kind of options for parents.
Now, there's always the fear, George, that the state is going to come in and sort of dip in the coffers, right, for other needs.
Yes.
And this is always a concern about these kinds of bills. Well, this initiative states very clearly that monies in the ESA trust fund shall be used only for the purposes of this act and may not be taken, used, or borrowed or collateralized for any other purpose. This is the only function for which these monies can be used. And George, what about parents gaming this system? And unfortunately, this has happened in some states.
Yes.
So an educational savings account or a voucher system has set up, and parents, some unscrupulous people, sign up for this. And they don't do a very good job of educating their children, but they're taking advantage of these state funds. So how does this legislation deal with that?
So this legislation provides some very strict boundaries. So number one, any eligible school is not permitted to receive these ESA monies of a student who is actually the child of a parent who is an employee, independent contractor, a corporate officer, or owner of that eligible school. So there are very strict boundaries here to where, let me just use an example from my own family, right? I'm the 8th of 12 children. If my parents wanted to, they could have created their own Rosca Classical Academy and have all 12 of us children go through their classical academy. And they're paid basically $17,000 per child per school year, right? So multiply, that by 12. Now, obviously not all of us were in TK through 12 at the same time, but let's just say in the maximum time, there was at one point 8 of us in school in those, so 8 times 17, that's a very good salary, right? So my parents, could have been homeschooling us or doing something like that and paying themselves a salary out of this, or other clever ways to create schools where, you get your nephews and nieces and other things. So yes, it's going to be almost impossible to game the system.
Human nature being what it is, some people act against their own interests and against they try to game the system, and this would set up an inherent conflict of interest if parents could pool this money for their own kids. That doesn't mean you cannot homeschool your child. There can be a homeschool that is taught by a separate group of parents that do have access to these funds if the school meets certain requirements. But this is a safety measure that, in my mind, George, is very commonsensical.
Yeah, I agree. Well, there's probably just one more item here to touch upon on, who appoints the ESA trust board members. And this is probably something that, it's, details, minutia, but very important. So the appointments are made by the Speaker of the California Assembly, the California Assembly Minority Leader, the Senate President, and then the Senate Minority Leader. And then the governor also gets to appoint one member here as well. But 4 have to be from eligible non-religious private schools. 8 are eligible from parochial schools of different religions. And then 1 parent with a child with an ESA receiving home-based education. So there will be a very broad form of representation on the Board of Trustees. Right. So, and that's very important. So
I agree. Well, this has a lot of benefits for low and moderate income families. Now right now they only have one choice, George, and that's the public school system. This would offer them a lot of benefits to get out of the public school monopoly, which is the worst. It's a government monopoly, which is the worst kind there is, which is fantastic. So, children in K through 12, there's immediate benefits there. You can quit a job paying a tuition for a full-time parent. Wouldn't have to do that anymore, just to fund private education, which a lot of parents are doing.
Well, yeah, most parents have, most households now are 2 working parents because one is probably working just to pay for the private school and the other one's working just to get by with the mortgage and the food expenses.
So this would open up private schools to non-affluent parents now, which is an incredible benefit.
So this just makes sense all around. And in fact, if we want to talk the game of equity, Mark, right? If we want to bring everyone, all the disadvantaged communities, and what better way than universal school choice? And I think the teachers union is going to have to find some clever way and tactic to go against their own DEI infused beliefs and how they're going to get around this. You know, I think we're going to have to kind of use their own pill against them and how this is marketed. But I think the low income community is going to be the biggest beneficiaries of all of this. You know, you talk about my family situation. I mean, we were well below the poverty line when we moved here. We were only able to go to the public schools right around our house where we can walk, or if there was a bus, like for our junior high, we ended up taking the bus. You know, everything we did basically had to be in walking distance from our house. There was just no way. My dad, who was the only one who had a car in the family, went to work with the car. My mom had no car. So everything revolved around that one car that we had and around that one working parent. So this is a game changer, I think, for all families, but especially the moderate to low income families in California.
It really is. I mean, when you think about it, right now the state is spending about $23,000 per student.
Say what?
$23,000. What is California getting for their money? California ranks among the bottom of all 50 states in terms of literacy, fluency in math, and it's just terrible. Not to mention the critical theory and woke ideology that children are being subjected to day in and day out. And parents, until now, have just not had an option to do anything else. This would effectively end the government monopoly in public education and open up education to the free market, right?
Yeah.
To the free enterprise system where enterprising people can figure out better ways, more less expensive ways, and more effective ways to educate their children in the mold that parents want their children to be educated, which is usually the best way.
So parents, 12 states already have this. Another 5 are in the works. Can we bring this to California? It will be a battle, but it's a battle that we must fight. And so we highly encourage you to get educated on the Children's Educational Opportunity Act, the CEO Act. That's the acronym, and share this. As we get closer to 2026, we'll be talking more about it and letting you know how you can join in that signature gathering process. But until then, please continue to go to protectourkidsnow.org. On our website, you'll find many resources, brochures, videos. You can hit a request a speaker button and invite Mark and I to come out and speak to your group. There's a donate button if you want to become a donor and be part of our ministry. We also are on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, X, and other places. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on Say What?
You've been listening to Say What, the radio ministry of Protect Our Kids, where they seek to inform and equip concerned citizens about the crisis in American public education and the forces working against our children. Join us at this same time every Saturday as attorney Mark Schneider and Pastor George Rosca Jr. unpack the issues so that we can better safeguard our nation's children. And join Mark and George right here next week at this same time for another episode of Say What.